Hey, it's Richard, the product professor at CarID.com, and today we're going to install a set of these Lumen 7-inch sealed beam LED headlights in this Jeep JK Wrangler. Today's install will feature lights that have a halo ring that will function as a DRL and will also flash amber in conjunction with the turn signal lights. Now before we start, let's cover several things you need to know. First of all, the tools and supplies you should have on hand. You should have an assortment of hand tools, including flat, Phillips, and Torx head screwdrivers, a multimeter or 12-volt test light, as well as these supplies: electrical tape, cable ties, and electrical connectors. We presume that you have some knowledge and experience working on automobiles, and let's not forget that we always want you to practice all necessary safety precautions whenever you're in the workshop working on automobiles. So let's get started. To put the Lumen LED headlights in, we need to remove the factory lights. On the Jeep JK, to remove the factory headlights, we must remove the grille. On this particular vehicle, we're going to use a flathead screwdriver. Your vehicle may differ. Some older JKs, you need to use both a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver to take out these clips all along the top of the grille. After you've pulled the top of the grille outward, you release the bottom clips also by pulling outward. Next, reach down to the turn signal bulb assemblies, give them a quarter turn, remove them from both sides of the grille, and remove the grille from the vehicle. We're ready to remove the headlamp, and on the Jeep, we do that by unscrewing this headlight bezel ring held in place by 4 screws. In this case, these are T15 or Torx 15 screws. We've taken the first 2 out already, so we're going to remove the 3rd and 4th screws. Be sure to save them. We are going to reuse these screws. You can use a screwdriver. You may have a bit and a power-operated screwdriver if you're clever. As you remove this final screw, be sure to hold on to the headlamp as we're doing here, because it will be loose and we don't want it to fall out. Pop that bezel ring off. The headlamp assembly is now loose. A very quick and simple quarter turn removes the headlamp assembly, and then we'll pull the bulb out of its socket. Next, from your headlight kit, find this wire harness, which consists of a long red wire and a shorter yellow wire. We're going to make this yellow wire connection first. This yellow wire will be connected to the turn signal circuitry in the Jeep Wrangler, because this yellow wire is what will cause our new headlamp halo to flash amber. Now, a very common mistake people make when probing these wires is people forget to turn the turn signal on. So right now we have the ignition on and the right turn signal is on. Using a multimeter or 12-volt lamp, probe these wires. We have found on the later model JKs that with the turn signal bulb facing outward, the rightmost wire is your turn signal circuitry. You're going to use the red or power probe at these wires, touch black to ground, and when your multimeter flashes between 12 volt and 0 volt, you know you have found the correct wire. Next, we're going to connect the yellow wire from the harness to the vehicle. We're going to do that with this 3M brand Scotch lock connector. You may want to use a similar connector or connection method of your choice. We put the 2 wires into the Scotch lock, and we will push down on this blade using a slip joint pliers. Next, we're going to run the red wire that's part of this harness up into the engine compartment. As you can see, it comes out here by the power steering reservoir. Please make special note that both of these wires need to run through the opening in the headlamp bucket. See how the yellow wire goes through and comes out here to join the turn signal circuit. If you don't do that, you run the risk of pinching these wires when you reinstall the headlight. For the halos to function as daytime running lamps, we need to connect our red wire to a 12-volt power source that is hot with the key on. Do not connect this directly to the battery positive. Your halos will be on all the time and you'll kill your battery. On earlier installations, We ran the red wire through the firewall and connected it to the 12-volt accessory outlet in the center console. And that method does work. An easier method is to obtain one of these add-a-fuse devices. You can get this on Car ID's website, which connects directly to the fuse box in the engine compartment. Looking at the schematic on the inside of the fuse box cover, we selected fuse position M14. You need to add several fuses into these slots on the add-a-fuse device. Connect this in the fuse box like that. The crimp connector is pre-installed on one end on the add-a-fuse device for us. We take our red wire and using a pair of pliers, we crimp that connection. We've routed the red wire alongside the fender and using cable ties, we've tied it into place as appropriate and brought the red wire around. You'll note that we filed a notch in the side of the fuse box. This is so when we close the fuse box door, we don't pinch the wire. We've already made our crimp connection, and now we're ready to move to the other side of the vehicle. Go to your kit and get your second wire harness with the long red and short yellow wires. Working on the other side of the car, the connections are essentially the same. We do want to remind you to be certain to pass the wires through the headlight bucket to avoid pinching. The yellow wire is connected to the turn signal circuit. The red wire, the connection is actually simpler. Simply run this wire through the engine compartment, meet it up with the first red wire, and connect the two red wires together using a Scotch lock or similar connector. And we are ready to make our electrical connections for our headlight. Go back to your installation kit. You're going to need to find a number of wiring connectors. First, there is this plug-and-play headlight connector. On one end, we have a plug that matches the factory plug where you disconnected the headlight. The other side of that is a 3-prong connector. So we're going to simply plug this connector into the factory plug like that. Next, we pick up a connector called the LED CAN bus connector, and that has a male and female 3-prong connector on each end. We're going to connect female to male, as so. And our final connection is going to be to the headlight, but an important note, there are two identical looking 3-prong connectors on the headlight wiring harness. One is labeled H for headlight, and the other is labeled DRL for daytime running lamp. So be certain you select the appropriate connector. We're making the headlamp connection to the side marked H. We find our halo 3-prong connector, and we connect that to the side marked DRL, and our headlight electrical connections are done. Before we physically attach the headlight to the car, we need to feed this wiring through the opening in the headlight bucket. We recognize that we've gone from one electrical connector to multiple. So there's a number of wires to fit through here. Take your time, stay organized, and use cable ties to tie these wires up as neatly as possible. A best practice we want to point out to you is that this connector should remain oriented in this direction, which will minimize any chance of moisture entering this connection. We're finishing up our installation, and we're doing the physical install of the lights themselves. And we're doing that by taking our bezel rings that we had removed earlier, and with the same T15 torque screws, we're tightening down our bezel rings. Now, as a best practice, you want to check all of your functionality, your turn signals, your low beams, and your high beams to make sure that everything works. If you have a loose connection, something's not working as it should, you want to be able to fault trace that before you've completed the physical install. We finished tightening down these screws. Our headlights are in place. We're going to put our grille back in place, and we're just about done with this installation. Our grille is reinstalled. As you can see, we've got our halo functionality. This completes our installation of the Lumen brand 7-inch sealed beam LED headlights. This is Richard, the product professor at CarID.com. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.